What is it, would you say, that defines you, that makes you you? You can answer that question in all sorts of different ways. I suppose you could take the question very literally, as some have done, answer it in terms of pure chemistry. I am the 59 chemical elements that I physically consist of. A few years ago, I understand the Royal Society of Chemistry calculated that, taking Benedict Cumberbatch as a model, we are in fact £96,000 worth of chemical elements plus that. Your worth might be more or less than that, depending on how you physically proportion to Benedict Cumberbatch. But that's the region that we're in, each one of us. Or you could answer in terms of heritage. Who am I? I'm the product of the DNA that I've inherited, or the influences that I've absorbed, the social situations that I've been born into and nurtured in, the friends who've moulded me. You could answer in terms of psychology, my sense of my own identity. I am who I think I am. Or ambition, I am what I want to be. Or occupation, I am what I do. Any number of ways of answering that seemingly, well, deceptively simple question: what makes you you? One of the more profound answers, though, is that you and I are really defined by who or what we worship. The thing that I make ultimate in my life inevitably shapes the person I am. What I mean is, if I make, say, money the ultimate thing in my life, I'll start to see my identity inevitably in terms of where I rank financially, my bank balance relative to him or her, my income, my assets, my financial prospects. That's who I am. If I make sex the ultimate thing, I'll begin to define myself in terms of my sexual preferences, my sexual history, and so on. Those kind of things become fundamental to making me me. If I make power the ultimate thing in my life, that will become the lens through which I see myself. And in fact, everybody else around me, is he or she a potential competitor, a collaborator? Is she, are they just pawns that I can use to express my own? Do you see? The thing I make ultimate in my life inevitably shapes my sense of who I am. I become defined by what I worship. And we've all seen that, haven't we? In our own experience, we've seen the obsessive bodybuilder or runner or cyclist or whoever it is, and what that obsession is doing to them. The compulsive social media collector of friends and followers and likes and shares, and what that constant counting is doing to them. The one who has to escape reality at any opportunity into their world of drugs or gaming or alcohol or Netflix binge watching or whatever it is, and what that escapism that is primary in their life is doing to them. We've all seen it, haven't we, in our colleagues, friends, family members, maybe even when we look in the mirror. You and I are increasingly defined by what we worship. And when we finally wake up to that reality, we're obviously forced to confront a question afresh. If that really is the case, then who or what will I worship? Who or what will I prize in life more than anything else? What will become ultimate for me? It's a question God's people are regularly confronted with in the Bible. Perhaps most famously by Joshua at the end of the book that bears his name. Choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But when it comes to sheer drama, there's nothing to touch the way that same challenge was put to God's people by the prophet Elijah at Mount Carmel. It's an event that children's story Bibles and Sunday schools can't get enough of. But I suspect we'll find that it leaves all of us with some fairly searching questions. We're in 1 Kings 18, we're about to have our reading. We're picking things up with two larger-than-life characters, King Ahab and the prophet Elijah, each blaming the other's religious practice for the terrible drought that Israel is currently experiencing, which of course leads to the obvious question, well, who is the true God that the people of Israel ought to be acknowledging? Who should they be looking to for relief? And now Elijah is about to propose a plan to settle that question once and for all.
Good morning. If you don't have a church Bible, please just put your hand up, and I think there's still some more at the back. Our reading is from 1 Kings 18, from verse 19 to 46. That's on page 359, the church Bible. Now summon the people from all of Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to the people, "I am the only one left of the Lord's prophets, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull that was given to them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench round it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God." and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. "Go and look toward the sea," he told his servant. And he went up and looked. "There's nothing there," he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose, a heavy rainstorm came on, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel.
Thanks very much, Josh. Well, as I said earlier, it is a dramatic episode, isn't it? It is the contest to end all contests. You think Ironman competitions and Wimbledon head-to-heads and Strictly are where it's at? Now, this is taking things to a whole new level. What have we got here? To start with, we're introduced to the contestants. 2 gods. 2 gods. 2 potential objects of worship. 2 directions that people might turn to for what is going to be ultimate for them. Now, at first, it looks like the contestants are actually going to be the prophets, doesn't it? Verse 19, the audience is assembled, some of the people, and then the apparent contestants are introduced. Some of them to meet me, says Elijah, but also the hundreds of prophets on the other side, the ones Queen Jezebel had brought to Israel with her. It's going to be me versus them. That's what it looks like. But now it quickly becomes clear it's actually the God behind the prophet, or the gods behind the prophets, who are really in view. Verse 21, how long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. That word waver actually refers to something very physical. It's literally the word for limp around or hobble about. This spiritual indecision, this keeping a foot in both camps, this batting for both teams that Israel has been doing has left them just stumbling around in circles. It's got to stop, says Elijah. Which is it to be? Who is going to command your allegiance? Yahweh, the God of the Bible, or Baal, the so-called God of the neighboring nations? Of course, it's obvious which is the right answer. Baal, of course. Baal is the state-sponsored religion. Defying that could get you killed. And more than that, Baal worship promises the answer to all your dreams. Baal was reputed to be the god of rain and crops. So worshipping him was your ticket to prosperity. His temple was full of shrine prostitutes, which meant worshipping him was your ticket to sexual fulfillment too. And he was even known as the god of fertility and children, which meant financial security for you in your old age. There's a heady cocktail to be offered here, isn't there? Prosperity and fulfillment and security. Who wouldn't want those things? But of course, Yahweh, the God who brought Israel into being, had promised similar things, and not so much the prostitution, but he promised to protect his people and to prosper them. So which is it to be? Where will they look? Who will they worship? Now the truth is that You and I are making that same choice every day, aren't we? We find ourselves, what's that expression Elijah uses, wavering between two opinions. Will I enthrone the God of prosperity and fulfillment and security? Or will I worship the one true God, the God of Israel, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the King of all kings? Whatever the general orientation of our lives, those contenders to have our allegiance are both still there for us every day. Another situation, another set of circumstances, another overwhelming temptation, another bout of spiritual weakness, and we could go either way. The spirit or the flesh, Paul put it. Jesus or the world, or in these terms, God or Baal. It's a choice we know all too well, isn't it? Well, Elijah proposes that two contenders be asked to show what substance there is to their claims and their promises. Sacrifices will be set up on the altars of both of these so-called gods, and each of them will be called on to finish off the sacrifice. And verse 24, the God who answers by fire, he is God. Two gods then. Those are the contestants here. But with them, you notice, go two approaches to, I suppose we'd say today, spiritualities. When it comes to the approach to Baal, do you notice it's all about the activity? There's that repetition. Verse 26, they called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. Must have been hoarse after that. There's energy. End of the verse. They danced around the altar. There's even self-mutilation. After Elijah goads them, they take things up again, don't they? Verse 28, they slash themselves with swords and spears. 29, frantic prophesying all afternoon. So different, isn't it, when Elijah's turn comes? What does he do? It's very simple. Three things. His starting point is the covenant commitment of Yahweh to his people. You see that in verse 31. Those 12 stones, that reference to Jacob, he's intentionally recalling God's ancient commitment to his people, all 12 tribes of them, even these ones in the north, which have seceded in a sense. Whatever they've done, he's still their God. He's still committed to them. And Elijah is standing on that commitment. Then again, he takes his lead from God's word. Verse 36, I'm your servant, and I've done all these things at your command. He's approaching God in the wake of what God has said to him already. And then he frames the request not to save his own skin or reputation, but to increase God's glory. Verse 36, let it be known today that you are God in Israel. 37, answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. They're very different spiritualities, aren't they? One relies on human technique, the other relies on the grace of God. One tries to manipulate God into action, and the other simply asks him. One steps forward with a contract. I'll do this for you. You do your thing for me. And the other approaches with simple faith. I wonder what your approach is. It turns out, doesn't it, that the choice before us is not just who will worship, but how we'll worship. Strikes me today, religions and spiritualities around us are full of method and activity. There are incantations and mantras and rosaries and veneration of shrines and candles and incense and kissing of statues, rituals and all sorts. And the truth is, some of that has floated into Christian spirituality. Maybe I should say infected Christian spirituality, because not only is it foreign to the Bible, it's also dangerous. The very moment that we're wanting to come close to God by doing these kind of techniques, we're actually being taken away from him, going the opposite direction we want to go. Stand on his commitment to you. Take your lead from his word and come with the empty hands of faith before his throne. And that's the spirituality of the people of God in the Bible. Is it yours? Two gods, two spiritualities, and then two responses. Well, kind of two responses. What happened when Baal was called upon with all that activity? Before we answer that, worth bearing in mind what an easy downhill run it should have been for him. I mean, for a start, he's got the home ground advantage. Mount Carmel was an ancient site of Baal worship. He's been worshipped here for centuries. This is his home turf. He's certainly got the numbers. 450 prophets on his case against Elijah on the other team alone. His colleagues seem to be all hiding in caves, leaving just him. He's got the timescale advantage too, hasn't he? Got all day to act. He's even got the moisture content advantage, if that's a thing. 2.5 years of drought. The wood's going to be tinderbox dry. Just one spark should do the job. The odds are heavily stacked, in other words, in favour of this Baal. And yet what came of it all? Twice we got that summary. There's the midday update in verse 26. There was no response. No one answered. And then the end of day report in verse 29. There was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Total radio silence. All that shouting and dancing and self-harming. And it turns out Baal wasn't even there. You ever had that experience? You've been talking to somebody on the phone and you realise at some point that the connection has been lost and you're left just wondering how long it's been that you've been jabbering away with nobody on the other end of the line. Embarrassing, really. That's what the prophets of Baal got here. A one-way conversation. They've been talking to a brick wall. What happens when Elijah approaches the God of Israel? Well, despite it being an away match, far from the temple in Jerusalem, despite Elijah being vastly outnumbered as he was, despite it absolutely drenching the wood, making fire pretty much an impossibility, what did the people of Israel see? Verse 38. The fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. Just incredible. Even the stones are burnt up. Nothing left at all but scorched earth. What a glorious vindication of Yahweh, the true God of Israel, the true protector and prosperity giver of Israel. Here he is, restaking his claim to their allegiance, resetting his relationship with them, offering them a fresh start. That's not good news for the prophets of Baal. You notice there's no handshake and well played, sir, and 3 cheers for the valiant losers for them, is there? None of them make it home for tea that night. All killed. It's verse 40. And we struggle with that, don't we? It doesn't mesh well with our 21st century sensitivities. But don't miss what this really is. This act of judgment is not some petty settling of scores. It is God demonstrating his commitment to the long-term well-being of Israel. One commentator puts it like this: when you're dealing with a cancer that's eating the body from inside, you don't use paracetamol and band-aids. You blast that cancer with chemo. You attack it with the surgeon's knife. It's painful, but it's got to go for the body to thrive again. Anything that stands in the way of the long-term prospering of God's people has to go. Alternative objects of worship, they promise much, but they deliver little beyond the short term. The true God promises long-term security and a long-term relationship with him that he'll never renege on. And he delivers. That's a glimpse. There is a glimpse later in this chapter of what that looks like. This awful drought that Israel had experienced is about to come to an end. In verse 44, do you see that? The cloud appears on the distance horizon, just a tiny outline, the size of a man's hand. But by the next verse 45, it's a deluge. And the land can live once again. Food, water, prosperity. As I say, it's just a glimpse. There's an awful lot more to come of vitality and prospering in a relationship with the true God. God wins. And Jesus wins. See, God won that day on that hill, but on another day, on another hill, just outside Jerusalem, despite every appearance, Jesus, the Word made flesh, would win once again. In full view of the people, he had accomplished exactly what he, the servant king, came to do, and win glory for himself and salvation and prosperity for his people. He'd back it up a couple of days later with a jaw-dropping conquest of death itself, the resurrection of Jesus. But that's the message, isn't it? Consistent through the Bible, that God wins. Jesus wins. He's the only one with substance to his claim to our worship. Two gods, two spiritualities, two responses, but that really leaves only one possible decision, doesn't it? It's there in verse 39. The people worship Yahweh, the God of the Bible. Do you see? They fell prostrate. And more than that, they celebrate Yahweh. The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. It is the obvious conclusion, isn't it, from what they've seen? The only rational response to what's been on display before their very eyes. You sometimes hear people talking about faith and recognition of God as being irrational and unscientific. It's hard to see what else your observation of the available data would have led you to on this day, other than a decision to recognize this claim to deity as genuine and to respond to him as God himself. So wherever we are in our hearts, I take it there's a challenge to us here. As we think about who it is we are worshipping in our lives and how. And maybe the truth is you've been avoiding the God of the Bible. You've been interested, and you remain interested, to look into the Christian faith. It's why you're here today. But if you're honest with yourself, so far this God that's on your horizon has never really become your God. You're here in church on Sunday, but the other 6 days of the week, your God has been more like that Baal. It's prosperity and fulfillment and security that have been the ultimate things in your life. You may have a broadly Christian worldview and morality, but you've never actually committed personally to the true God. Maybe this showdown that we've been looking at today is a call to action for you. Maybe it's a catalyst to you to take a big step. Has the time finally come to turn your life towards the true God and Father of our Lord Jesus? Or maybe it's not so much that you've been avoiding God. Two-timing him would be perhaps the more appropriate expression. That phrase we've been looking at earlier on was back in verse 21, wasn't it? Wavering between two opinions. It sounds very neutral, doesn't it, to the modern ear? We like people who are cautious. Well, that's commendable even. There's a humility about not being completely sure that you've made the right call and testing the waters elsewhere and just making sure. Is that what you think? Let me ask you this. Suppose a married man decides to go and sleep with a colleague from work. Next day he goes home and sleeps with his wife instead. And then the following week he kind of does the same pattern. He's going from one to the other. Let me ask you, is that neutral? It's not neutral, is it? It's betrayal. He's not a free agent. He's a married man. So it is with us. We stand as the redeemed people of God. He's declared his commitment to us. He declared it in the blood of his son, Jesus. We declare our commitment to him. We go by the name of Christian. We don't get to jump into bed with some so-called God of prosperity and fulfillment and security, or even careerism, or leisureism, or achievementism. We don't get to do that whenever we have the win. That's betrayal. Is that the life you've been living? Flitting between God and some alternative? Is that the reality of your heart? If it is, it sounds like you need to recommit to your covenant partner. Stop wavering. Let Jesus fill your horizons again. Maybe you've simply been disengaged from God. That is, you're with him in relationship, at least notionally, but you don't really express that relationship, if the truth be told. At the end of this chapter, the way in which the drought finally comes to an end is through the prayers of Elijah. Verse 42, he climbs up a mountain, this Mount Carmel, and he falls on his knees before God. And later in the Bible, this very episode is picked up by James. And we're told that Elijah wasn't just sitting there, he was praying. In fact, that prayer is held out by James as a model to all believers today. It's one thing simply to recognize God as your Father. Oh yes, to call him that. It's another thing altogether to come before him each and every day and talk to him as Father. Father, Dad, this is what's going on in my life. Dad, thanks so much for sorting that out. Dad, this is what I really need. Please, can you help me? Do you see? It's engaging with him as the one you say he is, your Father. It's working out the relationship in reality. Like it or not, we're defined by who or what we worship. The question is, well, what will we worship? Or who? And how will we do it? A moment of quiet as we reflect on this extraordinary episode and hear what God is saying to us through it. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Heavenly Father, this really is an extraordinary public display of your power and your deity. We live now on the other side of that other great display of the same things, the resurrection of Jesus. And our prayer is now, Father, that as we look back on that event, the bedrock of our faith, you would allow us and prompt us even to build our lives on it, to respond to it by true, undivided worship of our great King, the Lord Jesus. We take him today as our King, our guide, our judge, and our hope. Amen.